Gary, welcome to myprintresource.com. Glad to have you with us at the show, Graph Expo 2012.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited to be here, and I'm also excited to be at the show as well.
Is the show going well for you?
Yes, it's going very well.
You're the umbrella group for the printing industry. What's the feedback that you're hearing so far?
Well, what I'm hearing my focus is really environmental health and safety, but what I'm hearing from the folks at our booth and the vendors I'm speaking to, that they're having a great show, that the traffic is up and people are spending money, which is a good thing. But as a whole for the industry, I think that's really good, because that means that maybe we're out of the bottom and we're starting back on the growth, on the path of growth, especially if people are making investments.
Well, focusing on your realm of expertise here, which is sustainability, of course, and every industry in the world has to have some sort of a sustainability project, but this whole idea that print kills trees, what's your take on that? What's the bottom line, so to speak?
Well, I think the issue is that first of all, it's an urban myth, so to speak. I think the issue of where print kills trees was really done to help the electronic bill paying folks move towards encouraging their customers to do electronic bill paying versus paper bill paying. And as a result of the work that they've done, they've really pushed that myth out in many different channels. And so it's a message that, based on their research that they've done, really resonates with the general public, but unfortunately it's not true. In fact, the term greenwashing, which is used in some instances for companies that make claims that aren't true about their products, this is clearly a case of greenwashing. In fact, we've really spent a lot of time and effort trying to dispel that myth. At Printing Industries of America, we have a flip book that we are featuring here at the show called The Value of Print, which are facts that dispute that concept where print grows trees. We're making that available to our members, and it's available for downloading off our webpage for free, because we really want to spread the word. I give a lot of presentations on this topic, and I spend a considerable amount of time going through the facts.
Sure.
Where, at least in North America, you have a net increase in forested land, and actually trees have an economic value that allow us to utilize that natural resource, but to preserve that natural resource. So a lot of the paper companies have invested considerable time and effort into ensuring that the trees that they use that are in a steady supply, and that the resource is not being depleted, and preserving the ecosystem. So it's really a misnomer in terms of what's actually occurring with paper. And believe it or not, actually using paper is better, because it sends a signal to the marketplace that we want more paper, so that the landowners, and what's interesting is that 60% of the land, or even higher, 60% of the land is owned by private owners, that they supply 90% of the pulp comes from private ownership, which means that these folks who own that forested land, they have a choice, and they can continue to use that land and preserve that ecosystem and supply trees for wood and wood products. And by the way, a lot of the trees that are harvested don't necessarily go into paper. A lot of the paper is made from the byproducts. The primary source of wood, are building supplies and other things.
Sure.
But there are some trees used to make paper, so I can't deny that. But not all trees go into paper making.
Oh, absolutely.
But these guys who own this land, they want to make money. And so if we don't use paper, a lot of times that land can be converted to non-agricultural use or non-productive use. It'll go to a parking lot, it'll go to an apartment house. And interesting enough, the reason why we've seen an increase in the forested land in North America is because farmers are reclaiming marginal cropland. So they want to make money. They either do it by growing crops, or now they're planting trees, and they're using that land for a source of income. So this issue of saving trees is, again, a misnomer. And really, what really hammered that home to me was I had a opportunity to visit some lands that were managed by Finch Paper, and all the other paper companies are like this, but they have 4 full-time foresters that their entire job is to go out and mark individual trees for harvesting. And they visit every area that they own every 120 years. So what that means is that every 120 years, that tree will be turned over and used. because in many instances those trees will die from disease, fire, other natural.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the tree,
Right.
you know, we're not keeping these trees forever, although, you know, we do have an affinity for trees and we do like to preserve forest land, etc., and preserve that ecosystem. But what they're doing is they're managing that area. It's a healthier forest. They're managing it to preserve the ecosystem, and the key is preserving the ecosystem. The trees are part of that ecosystem, but they're utilizing those trees in a beneficial aspect. So
is there any way to measure the, let's say, the footprint environmentally between, let's say, print and electronics? Is that a doable
Oh yes,
thing?
well there's a lot of attempts being done, and they've been mixed results.
Okay.
And the issue is that in many instances, we end up comparing apples and oranges. And so in order to do those comparisons, they've done them in two different areas. One is looking at one single aspect called greenhouse gas emissions. Another one is called life cycle assessment. And when you look at life cycle assessment, that's basically the true and total cost of a product's impact on the environment, whereas greenhouse gas emissions looks at embedded energy into a product. And I've seen studies that have shown print is far superior than electronic communication. I've seen studies that show electronic is far superior.
Sure.
But when you look at the studies, especially the ones where the electronics are claimed to be far superior than print, what you find is that in their scope and assumptions, they make some pretty stretchable claims. And in fact, I was going back and forth with one person writing a paper comparing an annual report between electronic and print. And what struck me as being a big error in the electronic side, and of course they concluded electronic was better, they assumed that a computer, data server, and your smartphone device, everything the electronic just kind of parachuted into the equation. It had no environmental impact. They looked at the environmental impact of making paper, which is fair, right? Because that's the substrate.
Yeah.
But they never considered any of the environmental impacts associated with computers. And if you just have been paying attention, there was a group that came out and did a study of the toxic chemicals that are in cell phones and how they ranked relative to lead and other precious
Sure.
metals, plastics, fire retardants. And there's nothing at all that's renewable about a computer or a smartphone. It's not recyclable, whereas when you look at paper, paper is completely renewable. It comes from a natural resource. It can be recycled. In fact, paper is one of the most recycled materials in the world. And in the US, we're about a 64% recovery rate of all paper used, where for electronics and communication, it's a fraction of what's being recovered. So when they do these studies, they have to take into account, you know, so if you forget half the environmental impact of the electronic media, of course it's going to be better, right? But if you include that, then it becomes a lot more favorable, in my mind, to the print side.
So the near term for you then is to keep chipping away at the misinformation.
Oh, definitely. It's like sometimes we're pushing a big rock uphill, and
Yep.
because the perpetuation of this information is widespread. Because if anybody who opens a bill from any one of their utilities or any one of the department stores, that message tends to gets reinforced, and people have this belief that print kills trees, and print actually encourages, and I think, in my opinion, is much better from an environmental perspective. In fact, it is far superior than electronic communication. With that being said, though, you know, electronic communication is not going away.
That's right.
It's here to stay.
Yeah.
It continues to grow. And it continues to play
and so does print.
Yeah, and it continues to play a big influence in our life. And I think ultimately, when you look at this print versus electronic issue, the question is effectiveness. And when you look at the studies, still print by far is superior from an effectiveness standpoint. To get someone to take an action is based on print. People prefer print over electronic media in many instances. So to me, and then print by far is superior in many aspects, but again, people love their computers. I mean, I use a computer, I use a smartphone, so you know, it's part of your life. I mean, it's integrated.
Thanks for stopping by, Gary.
Oh, great.
Appreciate your effort here on behalf of Printing Industries of America. Hope you enjoyed Graph Expo 2012.
Yes. Well, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Okay.